Ron Howard, the beloved filmmaker and actor who captured hearts since his days on Happy Days,
I heard it was going to be a hell of a show.
Now, who told you that?
Some guy I know.
and later behind the camera with classics like Apollo 13 and A Beautiful Mind,
was one of the most brilliant minds of his generation.
Who among you will be the next Einstein?
has always been admired for his calm presence and uplifting storytelling. But now, at this stage of his career, Howard has finally broken his silence.
Over the top? No, we had no over the top rules. We were totally reasonable, thoughtful parents who made solid decisions at every turn.
Only this time, the news is anything but comforting. His revelation has stunned Hollywood, unsettled fans, and raised serious concerns about the industry itself. So, what could possibly be so troubling? Let's uncover the truth. Ron Howard's greatest regret. Ron Howard, the well-known actor and director, recently opened up about one of the most painful truths of his life. He never fully appreciated his mother while she was alive. For him, this regret lingers like a shadow, one that no amount of fame or success can completely erase. His reflection is not just a personal story. It is a lesson for all of us about love, gratitude, and the people who quietly shape our lives. As a teenager, Howard admits he often brushed his mother aside. Like many young people, he was caught up in his own world, dreams, ambitions, and the struggles of growing up. To him, his mother's words sometimes felt like background noise, her sacrifices unnoticed, her emotions unrecognized. He confesses that he didn't really stop to think about what she might have been going through, the daily struggles she endured, or the depth of the love she carried in silence. It wasn't that he didn't care. Rather, it was the typical blindness of youth. Teenagers often believe they see the world clearly, but their vision is narrow. They are quick to judge, quick to dismiss, and slow to understand. Howard now realizes that he missed the chance to look deeper into his mother's heart during those years, to understand that her strength was not loud or dramatic, but quiet, consistent, and powerful. With time, life has a way of opening our eyes. For Howard, this awakening came through two important experiences: fatherhood and professional growth. When he became a parent, he began to see the world differently. The long nights, the constant worry, the endless sacrifices. All of these gave him a new respect for what his mother must have carried for him and his siblings. Parenthood forced him to walk a mile in her shoes, and suddenly the things he once overlooked became crystal clear. Professionally, too, as he rose through the ranks of Hollywood and faced the heavy weight of responsibility, Howard recognized qualities in his mother that mirrored the very values guiding his own career: resilience, patience, quiet determination, and a refusal to give up when things got hard. He saw that much of his strength, the discipline that allowed him to push through challenges and setbacks, had been planted in him by her example. She wasn't always vocal about it, but her way of living left a permanent imprint on his character. Looking back, Howard admits with honesty that his mother was one of the greatest influences in his life, even if he failed to see it at the time. This realization came too late for him to tell her directly in the way he now wishes he had. And that is where the regret lies, not in the lack of love, but in the lack of recognition. He didn't give her the honor she deserved while she was still around to hear it. His reflection carries a universal message. How often do we take for granted the people who stand by us, the ones who quietly hold us up while we chase our own dreams? Parents, mentors, friends, siblings. Sometimes their greatest gift is not in grand gestures, but in their quiet, steady presence. Yet we only notice the depth of their love and sacrifice when life slows us down, or worse, when they are gone. Howard's story is a reminder for all of us. Don't wait until it's too late. Look closely at the people who shape your life. Notice their sacrifices, acknowledge their strength, and express your gratitude while you still have the chance. Appreciation has power. It uplifts those we love, and it frees us from the heavy chains of regret. In sharing his own pain, Howard offers us a gift, the chance to pause, reflect, and choose differently. Because the truth is, the quiet heroes in our lives deserve to be celebrated not in memory, but in the present. Apart from his attitude towards his mother, was there any bitter experience he had previously narrated? Was it related to his career or personal life? How did he feel about it? Let's find out. Happy Days, Bitter Nights. In 1974, television came knocking, and Ron Howard answered. This time, he landed the role that would make him a household name across America, Richie Cunningham, on the hit sitcom Happy Days. For Ron, the opportunity seemed like a dream come true, almost like finding a golden ticket.
In the family, although the older brother kind of vanished, Chuck. Two different actors played Chuck, and then finally Chuck was just sort of written out of the show because it just wasn't enough for Chuck to do, I guess.
The show was an instant sensation, pulling in nearly 11 million viewers every single week. Audiences loved Richie. They welcomed Ron back into their living rooms as the clean-cut, good-natured son every parent wanted and every teenager could relate to. It felt like lightning had struck twice in his career. But as the bright lights of success shone on Happy Days, darker shadows began to form behind the scenes. By 1976, just 2 years into the show's run, something unexpected happened. Henry Winkler, who played the leather jacket-wearing, motorcycle-riding Arthur Fonzie Fonzarelli, started stealing the spotlight. Originally written as a supporting character, Fonzie quickly became the breakout star. Audiences adored his cool catchphrases, signature thumbs up, and rebellious charm. Soon, the Fonz was overshadowing Richie Cunningham himself. The network executives at ABC noticed the shift in popularity and even floated the idea of renaming the series Fonzie's Happy Days. To Ron, this felt like a personal betrayal. He had signed on as the central figure of the show, the wholesome heart around which the story revolved. Now his role, and even his identity on the show, seemed in danger of being erased. Ron was furious. He made it clear he was ready to walk away, even though he was bound by contract. Fans across the country rallied behind him. ABC was flooded with letters of protest, thousands of viewers insisting that the show must remain Happy Days, not Fonzie's Happy Days. Under pressure, the network backed down and kept the original title. On the surface, Ron had won that battle, but behind the smiles and canned laughter, the tensions never really went away. The set of Happy Days was far from the cheerful, family-like environment it appeared to be on screen. As the seasons went on, conflicts multiplied. Cast members clashed over who deserved a bigger share of profits from the booming merchandise tied to the show. Tempers flared. Some actors stormed off the set in anger. What had started as a light-hearted sitcom had become a battleground of egos and financial disputes. Years later, several cast members would even take ABC to court, suing over unpaid royalties from merchandise sales. Looking back, Ron admitted that the show that once felt like his golden ticket had also been a cage. The stress, resentment, and constant tug-of-war behind the scenes wore him down. By 1980, after 6 years of living in that storm, Ron decided he'd had enough. His departure shocked many, especially since he walked away from offers as high as $100,000 per episode, an enormous sum at the time. But for Ron, the decision wasn't about money anymore. He wanted freedom. He wanted to be more than just America's beloved TV son. He longed to create, to direct, to shape stories on his own terms, rather than play a role written for him. Walking away from Happy Days was his boldest move yet. To the outside world, it looked like Ron was finally seizing control of his own destiny. He was breaking free from typecasting, ready to transform from actor to filmmaker. The future seemed wide open, brimming with possibilities. Or at least, that was the plan. What Ron didn't know then was that leaving the safety of a hit show would bring a whole new set of challenges. The decision to gamble his career would test not only his talent, but his resilience. For the first time, he was stepping off the well-lit stage and into the unknown, chasing a dream that would either redefine him or leave him forgotten. So, how did he get to that stage? How was he able to rise to that level? Let's delve into the details of Ron's entry into Hollywood. From a baby in Hollywood's shadow to America's little boy.
As much as $1 and $2.
Well, what about Opie?
3 cents.
3 cents?
Yes. The next lowest was 5 cents.
Ronald William Howard did not merely stumble into Hollywood. It seemed as if the world of cameras, scripts, and stage lights had been waiting for him before he could even say his first words. At only 18 months old, barely more than a baby, he found himself on a film set, crawling across the screen in Frontier Woman. The role was small, forgettable even, labeled simply as The Baby. To anyone else, it could have been a passing coincidence, a cute family story to recall years later. But Hollywood has a strange way of choosing its stars, and fate had already begun sketching out a larger plan for Ron Howard. By the time most children were learning their ABCs, Ron was learning lines from scripts. At just 4 years old, he was already treading the boards in live theater, performing for audiences who saw more than a child. They saw talent. A year later, when he was 5, Hollywood came calling with a contract. The ink had barely dried before the industry claimed him as one of its own. And then, at the tender age of 6, he stepped into a role that would define his childhood and cement his place in American pop culture. Opie Taylor, on The Andy Griffith Show. For the millions of viewers who tuned in every week, Opie was the picture of innocence, a sweet, curious, freckled-faced boy who represented the very heart of small-town America. But beyond the glow of television screens, life for little Ron was anything but ordinary. His playground was a soundstage, his toys were props, and his childhood games consisted of memorizing scripts and hitting his marks with precision that grown actors sometimes struggled to achieve. Being in the public eye so young also carried its crueler sides. Ron's bright red hair and freckles, features that made him endearing on screen, sometimes made him a target of mockery off-set. Childhood teasing that most kids could escape followed him wherever he went, magnified by the spotlight that refused to dim. And though he carried himself with the discipline of a young professional, he was still just a boy, vulnerable to the physical dangers that came with long days on set. One such moment nearly ended his story before it had truly begun. It was 1962, and the 8-year-old actor was filming a lakeside scene for The Andy Griffith Show. What should have been a simple take turned into a life-threatening accident when Ron lost his balance and toppled out of a boat. The water swallowed him quickly, and panic set in as the child actor struggled to stay afloat. Fate, however, had written another twist. Andy Griffith himself leapt into action, pulling his young co-star to safety. In that moment, the bond between the two went far deeper than co-workers. Andy had literally saved the boy's life. To the audience at home, Ron Howard was still just Opie, the charming small-town kid who never seemed to grow up. But within Hollywood's machine, he was something else entirely. A child worker in an industry worth billions. Every smile, every scene, and every laugh came at a cost. The pressures, the exhaustion, and the emotional toll would leave marks on Ron that lasted far longer than his childhood fame. Behind the beloved image of America's little boy was a young actor carrying scars, emotional, physical, and psychological, that he would wrestle with for decades to come. When did fame find Ron Howard? What character brought him into the spotlights? Which movie was it? let's dive into the details of Ron Howard's fame. The Curse of Opie. When the Andy Griffith Show came to an end in 1968, young Ron Howard was just 14 years old. For most teenagers, that age is a time of fresh beginnings, new adventures, and the freedom to reinvent themselves. Ron, too, was eager for a clean slate, a chance to grow beyond the lovable, freckle-faced Opie Taylor he had played since childhood. But Hollywood, with its sharp memory and even sharper judgments, wasn't quite ready to let him move on. Ron Howard's early years in Hollywood were marked by a shadow he couldn't escape. Opie. Casting directors, producers, and even fellow actors saw only the little boy from the Andy Griffith Show. Whispers followed him everywhere, sometimes behind his back, sometimes boldly to his face. "He'll always be Opie." Those words were like chains, binding him to a past he longed to outgrow. No matter how hard he tried, the label stuck. Audition after audition, he walked in with hope and walked out with the same crushing result. A polite smile, a rehearsed compliment, and a rejection that stung more than the last. Nearly 50 times he faced that same ending, each one carving deeper into his confidence. By his late teens, rejection wasn't just familiar. It had become his daily reality. Yet behind the discouragement, Ron carried a quiet determination to prove them all wrong. But then, in 1973, something shifted. A young filmmaker named George Lucas was putting together a quirky, low-budget movie about teenagers cruising through the streets of Modesto, California. The film was called American Graffiti. Lucas saw something in Ron that others had overlooked. He gave him a role, a chance, and perhaps, most importantly, hope. The project didn't look like much at the time, but when it finally hit theaters, American Graffiti became a massive hit, earning over $115 million and launching a wave of careers. On paper, it should have been Ron's big break, the moment when he proved he was more than just Opie. But behind the cameras, the story was much darker. While the movie won the hearts of audiences, Ron was enduring one of the most painful experiences of his young career. Some of his co-stars, including Harrison Ford and Paul Le Mat, decided to make Ron the target of their cruel jokes and bullying. They didn't just tease him, they tormented him. They threw beer bottles at his car, locked him inside a trailer for laughs, and even forced him to dance while they mocked him, chanting, "Dance, Opie, dance." For Ron, it wasn't just childish hazing. It cut deeper. It was humiliation that touched the very core of his identity. All those years he had tried to escape the shadow of Opie, and here he was, being dragged back into it in the ugliest way possible. Later in life, Ron would call it Opie shaming, a cruel reminder that no matter how hard he worked or how high he climbed, Hollywood would always see the little boy from Mayberry. The wounds from that time stayed with him for years. Though Harrison Ford eventually offered an apology, the damage had already been done. The experience confirmed Ron's worst fear, that his past, instead of being a foundation for growth, was becoming a chain that held him back. Yet ironically, it was also those painful years, the rejections, the bullying, the scars, that shaped him into the resilient, determined storyteller the world would later celebrate. Apart from appearing on the camera, what has Ron Howard's been known for? Let's dig into the details of Ron Howard's dreams in Hollywood, beyond acting. Directing dreams, nightmarish sets. Ron Howard is remembered today as one of Hollywood's most accomplished directors, but the road he traveled to reach that point was anything but smooth. Before audiences applauded his creativity, Howard had to wrestle with dangers, failures, and controversies that could have easily ended his career. His story is one of ambition, constantly shadowed by risk. Howard's directorial debut came with Grand Theft Auto in 1977. It was a small, low-budget production that surprisingly became a commercial success. Yet behind the laughter and crashes that entertained audiences, there was chaos. A daring stunt went terribly wrong, leaving one performer seriously injured. Instead of basking in triumph, Howard found himself facing lawsuits, guilt, and the sobering reality that filmmaking could be as dangerous as it was exciting. Still, he pressed forward, chasing bigger and bolder projects. The 1980s became his proving ground. With Splash in 1984, he showed the world he could mix romance, comedy, and fantasy into a box office hit. The following year, Cocoon cemented his reputation as a director with heart. Then came the fantasy epic Willow in 1988 and the high-octane thriller Backdraft in 1991. Yet success was never simple. On set, tempers flared. Actors clashed with one another. At times, extras made shocking threats, even promising violence if things didn't go their way. During the fiery sequences of Backdraft, the flames were all too real, leaving some performers physically scarred. Every victory carried a hidden price. In 1995, Howard reached new heights with Apollo 13, a gripping retelling of NASA's near-disastrous lunar mission. The film was a triumph, pulling in $355 million and winning critical acclaim across the globe. But even that achievement nearly unraveled. Tom Hanks, the film's star, had last-minute concerns that threatened to stall production. For a time, the project hung in uncertainty. Howard managed to pull it together, but the stress left its mark. The finished product was hailed as a masterpiece, yet behind the applause was a director who had endured sleepless nights and tense standoffs to make it happen. Then came the most controversial chapter of his career, The Da Vinci Code in 2006. Based on Dan Brown's best-selling novel, it had all the makings of another blockbuster. Instead, it exploded into a cultural firestorm. Religious leaders across the world denounced the film. Protests erupted outside theaters. Some groups called for outright bans. Howard received letters filled with anger and threats, some of them promising death. Even the Vatican publicly condemned his work. Despite fierce backlash, the Da Vinci Code stunned the world, raking in an unbelievable $760 million at the global box office. On the surface, it looked like a triumphant success, the kind every director dreams of. Yet behind the glittering numbers, Ron Howard's reality was far less glamorous. Fame brought him not only recognition, but also restless nights filled with unease. He carried the heavy fear that his creative choices had placed a dangerous spotlight on him. What was once a straightforward role as a storyteller shifted into something heavier. He became a figure marked by controversy, seen by many as someone bold enough, or perhaps fated, to step directly into the heart of storms. For Howard, the film was more than a blockbuster. It became a turning point that reshaped how the world perceived him, forever binding his name to daring risks and the shadows they leave behind. Ron Howard's career is a testament to resilience. For every hit, there was a hidden cost. For every success, a shadow lingered. His journey reminds us that greatness is rarely achieved without scars. Does Ron Howard have a life outside Hollywood? Did he live all his life for Hollywood? Let's talk about Ron Howard's life outside Hollywood. Behind the curtain. When the bright lights of Hollywood tried to break him down, one steady hand never let go. That hand belonged to Cheryl Alley, the quiet high school girl who had captured Ron Howard's heart long before fame, money, and critics became part of his daily reality. Long before the red carpets and studio contracts, there was simply Ron and Cheryl, two teenagers sharing simple dreams. In 1975, they sealed their promise with marriage, stepping into a journey that would be tested by the dizzying highs and soul-shaking lows of Hollywood life. While others saw Ron as an actor, a director, or a celebrity, Cheryl always saw the boy she fell in love with, the young man who laughed with her, dreamed with her, and wanted nothing more than to tell stories that touched lives. Together, they built a family, quietly and without fanfare. as if creating their own hidden refuge away from the chaos of flashing cameras and unrelenting headlines. That family became his anchor, the force that steadied him when storms gathered around. Their 4 children grew up not just in the shadow of fame, but in the warmth of a home held together by love and stubborn commitment. Among them was Bryce Dallas Howard, who, instead of being carried solely by her father's name, carved out her own place in Hollywood, proving that determination and hard work can still matter in a world of shortcuts and nepotism. Each child gave Ron another reason to keep pressing forward, another reminder that life was bigger than scripts and movie sets. But a love story lived under the glare of the spotlight rarely comes without cracks. Their marriage was tested again and again. Rumors floated through gossip columns. Hollywood insiders whispered about breakups and breakdowns. And Ron's own deep love for his work nearly drove a wedge between them. Workaholism crept into their home, stealing time, stealing presence, and sometimes leaving Cheryl to wonder if she was losing her husband to the same machine that had taken so many others. Yet Cheryl never surrendered. She refused to let Hollywood devour the man she loved. With quiet strength, she pulled him back whenever the weight of fame tried to consume him. She reminded him of where he came from, of who he was before the cameras. When the world demanded too much, she gave him space to breathe. When temptation lurked in glittering corners, she anchored him to reality. Her loyalty wasn't loud, but it was unshakable. For half a century, she chose to fight for their marriage, and in doing so, she safeguarded the family and the man at its center. Then came 2025, their golden anniversary. 50 years of promises kept, storms weathered, and battles won. Instead of grand celebrations or luxury parties, Ron and Cheryl returned to where it all began. They ordered pizza, curled up for a movie, and climbed into the same old Volkswagen Bug they had driven on their very first date. It wasn't about the years, the fame, or even the golden number they had reached. It was about remembering the simplest truth. Through it all, they still had each other. Their story is not just about Hollywood survival, it is about love that endures when the spotlight fades, commitment that outlasts the noise, and the quiet heroism of a woman who refused to let go of the man she knew long before the world claimed him. Despite Ron Howard's early appearance in Hollywood several decades ago, he still remains active in the industry. Let's dive into the details of Ron Howard's survival in Hollywood. Hollywood's unlikely survivor. Ron Howard's journey through Hollywood is not the polished, glittering fairy tale people often imagine when they think of fame. His life is not a story of sudden success, followed by effortless glamour. Instead, it is a story of grit, of struggle, and of survival in an industry that has broken far stronger personalities than his. From the very beginning, Howard's path was lined with challenges. As a child star, he stepped into the spotlight at an age when most children were still learning how to ride a bicycle. Childhood fame is a blessing on the surface, but more often, it is a curse. Many young actors, adored on the screen, end up lost in adulthood, chewed up by the same adoring machine that once celebrated them. But Howard refused to let that be his ending. He endured. He kept going when others stumbled. He found a way to survive. He survived the kind of humiliation that could have ended a career before it truly began. On the set, even his own co-stars sometimes mocked him, underestimating his quiet nature and youthful appearance. He endured ridicule, labels, and the stinging cruelty of people who thought he was destined to remain a child actor, and nothing more. He survived lawsuits, bitter betrayals, and even death threats that came with fame and responsibility. He walked through the chaos of disasters on film sets, events that could have not only derailed projects but also destroyed reputations. For many, these storms would have been the end. For Howard, they became lessons, Each challenge forced him to dig deeper into himself, to find strength in persistence, and to prove that he was far more than what people assumed. Hollywood is notorious for being heartless. It has a way of chewing up fresh talent, draining their spirit, and spitting them out without a second thought. Many stars who seemed untouchable in one decade are forgotten the next. Howard, however, refused to be swallowed. The machine tried, but he kept moving. He stayed. He worked. He adapted. And most importantly, he endured. Consider one of his most vulnerable moments. As a boy on The Andy Griffith Show, he nearly drowned during filming. That terrifying experience shaped his entire perspective as a filmmaker. From then on, safety on set was not just a concern, but an obsession. He never forgot what it felt like to face danger in a place where he was supposed to be protected. The memory etched itself into his creative DNA, pushing him to care for his cast and crew in ways few directors ever do. As a teenager, he carried another weight: the name Opie, the character that made him famous but also the label that made him a target for mockery. For years, the name followed him, almost like a curse, a reminder of his childhood role when he longed to be taken seriously as an adult actor and later as a filmmaker. Yet he transformed that ridicule into fuel. The same boy once teased for being just Opie grew into a man who could command Hollywood's biggest stars, hiring them, directing them, and, when necessary, firing them. The tables had turned, but Howard never lost the humility of someone who had been underestimated. Through all these trials, one truth remained constant: Ron Howard never stopped. He never stopped working, never stopped believing in himself, and never stopped pushing forward even when the odds were stacked high against him. He became living proof that persistence outlasts ridicule, that dedication outshines humiliation, and that survival is sometimes the greatest success of all. In his own words, Howard once revealed a truth hidden behind the glitter. People see the movies, the awards, the red carpets. What they don't see is the pain, the accidents, the lawsuits, the ridicule. But those are part of the story, too. Maybe they're the reason I made it. Those words capture the essence of his life. The success people admire today is built on a foundation of battles fought in silence, moments of pain that shaped his resilience and carved out his strength. Ron Howard is not simply a director, nor just a Hollywood success story. He is a survivor, a man who faced the industry's darkest tests and turned each one into a stepping stone. He transformed pain into power, ridicule into resolve, and silence into a story worth telling. In a world where so many fall, his tale stands as a reminder: survival can be the greatest triumph of all. So what do you think about Ron Howard's greatest regret? Is he likely to fix that for his children? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe.